And I just turned around and I hauled ass out of there. I was done. I wasn't dealing with that.
The hypocrisy of the cult is one of the things that turned me away the quickest.
When I turned my headlights on, it turned and looked at us. And one of the things I remember the most were the eyes were glowing red.
I see an orb of light. It is just circling these steps like it is waiting for me.
And he begins to tell them that he saw a UFO. They're basically like, what are you talking about? That's 7 foot up on a tree, peeking around it. And that's where I saw the top of the muzzle, nose, and the eyes. As soon as I made eye contact with this thing, it felt like death.
Welcome back to Tinfoil Tales. I'm your host, Brandon Wright. Tonight's episode, we're going to be joined by my guest, George. George had a few experiences that he reached out to me and wanted to discuss. One that really piqued my interest was his near-death experience and what that entails. He also had some experiences with Sasquatch and some other cryptid-related information. I believe it'll be a good conversation for everyone. Before we bring George on, if you've ever had an experience or a story you'd like to share, you can reach out to Tinfoil Tales. All you got to do is send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com, or you can go to the website, tinfoiltales.com, and go to the contact section. Both of those will get your message to me. Even if you're not interested in actually being on an episode but would like your experience to be shared, you can email it or, again, reach out to the contact section. There is a blog on the website. I'm going to start posting up any of the submitted experiences from the listeners. So those will be available for anyone out there that's interested. Just check out tinfoiltales.com. If you want to help the podcast out, you can continue to share it around. Word of mouth is what has helped this podcast grow into what it has become. If you'd also like to leave a 5-star review on any of the listening platforms that you choose, that is one of the best ways to help the podcast. Makes it more visible with exposure. You can also join the Patreon, get access to ad-free content and early access to all the episodes right after I record them. I'll be posting them up on Patreon. There will be videos and some bonus episodes featured on there as well. So it's worth checking out. It's only $1.99 a month. So less than $2, and you get all that access to all that interesting content early. Make sure to follow us on all the social medias. Trying to be a little bit more proactive with it. You can interact with me. I'll be posting some things up there. Let me know how I'm doing. But I think now we're going to go ahead and bring George on. Been looking forward to talking with him. Dive into the topics that he wants to talk about. So hope you guys enjoy the conversation. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. I'd like to take this time to welcome my guest tonight, George. Thanks for coming on here and talking to me.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, not a problem. A little bit about yourself.
What is there to tell? I'm just an old fat country band. I've did a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Spent 4 years in the Navy. I did acting for independent films and stuff for 15 years. I've made explosives for the government. Whatever I set my mind to, I just jump in and do. I've wrote 6 books, and I got into all this ghost and this cryptic stuff. I enjoy it. And, so far, I've had a Bigfoot experience. I've seen UFOs, seen and talked to ghosts, and I died once. So it's been a busy life so far.
We'll definitely talk about all that, but I am interested in, you said you wrote some books. What kind of books have you written?
I wrote 4 little books that were it's called Legends, Myths, Monsters, and Ghosts. I broke them into regions, and
Okay.
I got contacted by a publisher, and they wanted me to do a couple of books for them. So I took the 4 books and I combined them into one. Then I added over 100 more stories to it, and I made Legends, Myths, Monsters, and Ghosts, the USA edition, which has probably around 8 to 10 stories for every state in the United States. And I also have 5 different Indian tribes, and I have about 5 to 8 stories for each one of those.
That's awesome. I'll make sure to include a link to that in the show notes for anyone interested. That's something I'd like to check out as well.
Thank you. Right now, they're all both my books are on Amazon.
Nice. Yeah, I'll make sure to include that in the show
Uh,
notes when the episode drops for everyone out there listening.
Thanks, I appreciate it. And the other book is called Monsters of the World. And I actually got the idea to do this book for podcasters. I got some friends that interviewed me. It's called Drink Beer, No BS Podcast. Those guys are wonderful. I don't know if I should promote them on here or not, but I think I'll just let you know who they are.
No, that's
And
fine.
that's got 104 different cryptid creatures from all over the world inside of broken regions with 26 encounters that were sent to me.
Hmm. These are all sorts of things, not just like the stereotypical Bigfoot type creatures, obviously.
Oh, there's everything in there. There's
Mm.
everything from a tree that will eat you in South America to giants to Loch Ness monster to uh, leprechauns down to a creature that they found in Antarctica that killed a bunch of Russian scientists. Just a little bit of everything.
Hmm. Want to check that one out too.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah. That's I love finding out more about these weird sightings and things that people have had or so they claim they've had or whatever. It's when it comes to cryptids, that's always been my bread and butter. I've always been a monster fan. So,
Oh, I understand that.
but yeah. Um you'd mentioned something about a podcast or whatever. Do you do your own podcast too?
Well, yeah, I got with these guys and Robert and Eric, and we started a little group called NCI, North Carolina Investigates. We do a podcast, and we also do all our investigations together. And we've recently brought in our buddy Harley. We brought in our buddy Tim Dills, and um, there's a couple other guys that just started. I can't remember their names right now because I have a horrible memory, so I have to apologize to them.
That's
Tim
fine.
Blevins and Dwight. And we do our investigations together and we talk about it on the podcast.
That sounds like a interesting and fun time.
Well, none of us is quite right in the head, so it's hilarious if it's nothing else.
That's the stigma that we all have to deal with when it comes to talking about cryptids. Is we've all got something wrong with us, apparently, at least to the outsiders.
That's true, but I never let that bother me before. So,
No, I'm doing this show and everything else. The people I've talked to, it's always been something that it's some like I don't know how to describe it. It's other than people are hesitant to ever really talk about the things they see because there is such a stigma of being labeled as a crazy person.
that's very true, and but it's not as bad now as it used to be.
Now, I think we discussed this on a previous episode just recently I had with someone that I think the stigma is changing because the internet. There's more ways to communicate now, obviously with social medias and everything else. There's more people that are open about it because it's easier to hide behind your screen and talk about things rather than go to work and be like, "Hey, saw Bigfoot." They're like, "What?" So I think that's kind of helped a little bit alleviate some of the bad vibes I guess people get from talk about weird things.
I think it's helped, and I also think that a lot of some of these TV shows like Finding Bigfoot and Bigfoot Expedition Bigfoot, excuse me, and all the Josh Gates shows, Mountain Monsters, and all. I think that's helped out a lot more too, because it brought it more mainstream for more
Hmm.
people to realize that even though most of them scripted,
Yeah.
but it still gives them something to say, oh look, here's a reality show about Bigfoot or monsters or ghost or whatever, ghost hunters and all that stuff. I think the more we get it out there and the more that people see and hear about it, I think the stigmatism is finally going to go away.
I went to a local Bigfoot meeting not very long ago, and surprisingly, there was quite a bit of people there. And I was kind of surprised that the turnout seemed to be older than what I expected it to be. I thought it'd be more like younger, maybe some middle age, but I seen like a lot of it looked to be almost like senior citizen people there as well. I thought that was kind of neat that they're also involved and they knew about it and everything. And one old guy had said something about how they smelled or whatever. I was like, that's interesting. Obviously, he'd seen something. So it's kind of nice that I guess in my interpretation of like the old timers or whatever, they wouldn't talk about it obviously because it still had that stigma to it. But it's nice to see that they're able to come out here and share their experiences with people at these meetings.
Oh yeah, yeah, I agree 100%.
But yeah. Well,
Well, like when I was growing up, I grew up in the. I was born in the late '60s, so basically grew up in the '70s. People just didn't talk about it. You didn't talk about ghosts. You didn't talk. People would put you in a nut house.
hmm
Talked about ghosts or UFOs or monsters. Everybody thought you was nuts. Nowadays, it's a passing conversation.
I don't know if it's still got the taboo stigma to it, but I do agree that it is more. I don't think you're looked at as funny as you used to be.
Well, I was telling, I know I work around a lot of people, and some of them I know don't believe in any of it, and that's fine. Everybody has their own opinions. But I also found that when I start talking about what I've seen and what I've experienced and everything else, people start coming out of their shell. And they'll start mentioning something. When I was young, I remember this happened, and I didn't really think about it till now. And they'll come out with different stories, and actually, people will start opening it up to you once you let them know what you've experienced.
I think that's something I've also kind of talked about a little bit beforehand is I think we've all had experiences and whether we realize it or not and whether we admit to it or not is different. But I think at some point, almost everyone's had some sort of weird experience with something.
Oh
And it's,
yeah,
it's just depending on how they're interpreted, I guess. Like, and some people just won't ever talk about it. And once they find out someone that is willing to talk about theirs, are more or less likely to like be hesitant about it. They'll actually share it with people.
oh yeah. That's really the reason I wrote my book, Legends, Myths, Monsters, and Ghosts, because I wanted people to have something to talk about and even go out and check out and research and really have fun with. Because when I was growing up, I don't know how old you are, but I'm turning 57. So when I was growing up, the older people would tell us stories about our local areas. And, being kids we were back then, we'd have to go check them out because there was nothing else to do. We didn't have internet, we didn't have all this fancy stuff. So we would go check out the ghost stories that they told us.
Yeah, that's I'm about to turn 40 here in like 2 weeks.
Oh, okay.
But they
Happy early birthday.
thank you. By the time this drops, I'll be 40 for like the last month and a half or something. But no, they when I was a kid, there was a place that we used to go up to, and there was the old urban legend. I think every area has it, like the old Hookman legend or whatever. The Hookman used to stalk the road and everything else. You don't go down that road at night because there's a guy with a hook on his hand and he'd get you or whatever.
Oh
But
yeah.
there was a cemetery and you couldn't get to it unless you got out of a vehicle. You had to park on the side of the road. It was up on top of this hill. And it was a really, really old cemetery. Some of the headstones and stuff out there were dated from like early 1800 areas. Like,
Oh
so
wow.
it's a pretty old cemetery. And a lot of them you can't even read anymore because it's just worn off.
Yeah.
But, and we went up in there and everyone's like, oh, can't go up there. There's spirits. There's all sorts of, nothing ever happened. Like anytime I was up there or whatever, we never had anything strange happen that I'm aware of. And then there's other places we went out to. There's a place they called Okefenokee out in our area that we'd go camping, and everyone's like, "Oh, it's so haunted," and this and that. I went out with paranormal researchers one time, and their meters were jumping this and that. Everything's paranormal, paranormal. I was like, I mean, I'm not going to lean that route. I try and remain skeptical on a lot of things. If I can't explain it, sure, it could be something, but there's also logical explanations as well. So
Oh yeah.
I don't just jump into it's a monster, it's a ghost, it's a this or that. Like
Oh no, me either. I don't do that.
I want to cover all my bases before I start coming off and saying it's something else.
No, I that the one of the first paranormal investigations we went to, uh, we got over there, and because of my experience with ghosts and everything, when I got there, I knew that was nothing to it because I didn't feel anything. And they're talking about, oh, the ghost did this, and this, and this. And I'm going, no, no. And he's talking about the ghost moves stuff on the shelves and stuff. And I was like, no, what moves the stuff on the shelf is the fact that you're sitting beside a road with big semi trucks going by, and the vibration across the granite is shaking the building, making the stuff move. They didn't like that. They don't like when you explain to them that what they're seeing is not ghosts. It's actually just very common.
Yeah, I've only talked to a few here and there as far as paranormal researchers, and I've talked to a couple of some of the actual group meetings and stuff that they've had around here. And it's like, I don't want to say what they're doing is wrong, but at the same time, it's like, I kind of question if what they're doing is accurate.
Yeah.
Like, just because you've got an orb on video,
Yeah.
is that a piece of dust? Or was that a bug? Like, you can't sit there and say it's like some sort of energy called an orb. So obviously this place got some sort of activity going on because you saw this. I mean, it could have been a lot of different things,
Yeah. I agree. I agree 100%.
but I don't try and disprove anything to anyone. If that's what they believe, I'm like, okay. Like,
Well, when I do stuff like that, I'm trying to make them understand just because something happened here doesn't mean it's haunted. You need to understand that you want it to be haunted in your mind. That's why you're
hmm
seeing this stuff. And when I try not to be rude or anything, but I just want people to understand that just because you want to be a ghost does not mean that it is a ghost. Just because you want to be Bigfoot does not mean it's Bigfoot.
Yep. No, that's
Because all they're doing is hurting their own research.
when you want something so bad to be something, you're going to make it something, whether it is or not.
Oh
So,
yeah, you can tie it all together in your head easily.
yeah.
I can't do that. I'm very much not a skeptic necessarily, but a realist. When I go in the woods and I see this is tore up, I don't automatically go, "Oh, that's Bigfoot." I go, "No, that looks like a bear," because I grew up in the mountains, in the woods, so I know what I'm looking at when I look at stuff. And some people just automatically jump to everything as Bigfoot.
Now, I've seen at this meeting and other things, they've shown like the tree snaps and how they're laying, like making these X's and designs, and one of the trees didn't even snap for there, had to been drug over.
Yep.
I was, I'm like, well, if it didn't snap and it got drug over, that's fine. I can see where that could be considered something, but I also look at the fact maybe it's just someone out there screwing around person-wise and did it. Like, I can't just say it's a Bigfoot because no one saw it being made that way. Like these structures, it could have just been some kids out there, some guy out there screwing around. Who knows?
It depends on where you're at. Yeah, I agree with that.
Like if you're out in a really, really, really remote area to where kids aren't going to be playing around and the average hiker's not going to be out there, like you're deep in the forest that's within miles and miles away from civilization, then yeah, that's a little different. But if it's not too
Right.
far off the beaten path, I'd be kind of skeptical about it being some sort of activity for a Bigfoot. I mean, it could possibly be, but I don't know.
Yeah, I understand.
But I've always said, I always quote the X-Files. I've always been like Fox Mulder. I want to believe. I've got that. I've got that sign up on the wall behind me, just like
Oh,
you
that's
do.
cool.
But going out there and seeing them, but man, I really wish it was a Bigfoot. But I've always been the type of to be more hesitant to be like, well, I don't want to get my hopes up. When you get your hopes up, you typically get let down.
True, true. I was lucky the one we went on that I actually seen the Bigfoot. I didn't believe that's what it was. But when it leaned out from the tree, it went from being a shadow to being a Bigfoot.
Hmm.
Never seen a shadow move when there was no light behind it.
Now, where was this at?
But we were in Tennessee. We were doing an investigation, and the four of us went. It was me, our new guy Harley. He'd been checking this place out for over a month, so we knew that there had been activity there. And Robert Effler and his wife Michelle was the other two is with us, and we were all there. We was going through. Now we found sign of elk, we found sign of deer, found bear sign, found bobcat sign, and other stuff. And some of the stuff I disproved when we got there as we was walking through the woods that it was bear that caused it. Some of it that I seen. But when the trees are twisted off about anywhere from 6 to 7 foot up, they're actually twisted and broke over. That really only indicates Bigfoot. I don't know anything else that can twist a tree and break it over that's 2.5, 3 inches round.
Yeah,
It's
they
still green.
they showed some photos like that too, and that's where I've kind of been like, all right, well, those seem more plausible because I don't see anyone going out there and twisting it without some sort of machinery because I don't know anyone strong enough to do that to like a 3 to 4 inch around
Yeah.
tree
And
sapling
if they
that's
did
still
at least some
growing.
kind of marks on it, and there was no marks on it.
Yeah, those are always the ones that kind of get me like, how's that possible?
Yeah. And we went through and we found some ambush sites. We found one ambush site that was kind of interesting. It was actually three game trails that come together in this one area. And apparently we scared something up before we got there because the greenery that was inside where this ambush site was, I could stand up, and I'm 6 foot tall. I could stand up with no problem in it. And the greenery was still rising up. So something we scared out there. I don't know what it was. But
Yeah,
we looked around and we found some stuff that could have been Bigfoot, and it made sense that it would be Bigfoot or a dog man. And we seen a big dog track that was larger than like a mastiff in here. And we didn't get to take pictures or cast it because we didn't really have the right equipment. Plus it was in leaves and you could see three toes and a fourth toenail had poked in through the stuff, the ground. And you could see it, but you couldn't get enough definition on a picture or anything because of where the leaves and everything were. So we figured that they, one of that may have been a dog man. Now we don't know for sure. But we went all the way through. We investigated the area. Was coming out, and Harley said, "Why don't we drop down on this flat down here and come up on that hill over there?" I said, "Okay, me and you'll go then." And they went down, and Robert and his wife went down the dirt road. Me and Harley gets down in there, and we find some bear signs, some other stuff. We come up the hill, and he looked over and he goes, "There it is." I was like, "Dude, that's a shadow." He said, "No, seriously, right there beside that tree." I said, "That's a shadow. It's just a big shadow off the tree." He said, "Well, just wait right here and let me go down and see if I can get a closer look." So he went down the hill. Was on one hill and this was on the other hill, and there's a valley between us, about 20 yards away. And he started down the hill, and he got probably 12, maybe 14 feet at the most in front of me. And he stepped on the stick and it snapped, but it snapped really loud. Well, the shadow I was watching all of a sudden moved. It leaned out from the tree with its arm on the tree. And I could see from the waist up that it wasn't no shadow. It was a jet black Bigfoot. And it had no neck. It had the shoulders up to the side of its head. It had sprigs of hair sticking up because when it moved, I could actually see the outline of it. Had the sprigs of hair on top of his head, and had a big arm, which probably would have come down mid thigh to almost knee. And I hollered, "Oh," an explanation word, and run down the hill to go get closer to it, which, that ain't gonna happen because they move so fast. But we come up the hill to where it was at, and I looked on the limb where the head was. It was 2.5 feet taller than me. And like I said, I'm 6 foot tall. We found, and the area that this thing was at was perfect. It had a big tree, laurels on both sides, and a big opening on top of this hill to where it could go down about 20, 25 feet, could drop off either to the left or to the right. And we decided, we looked around there for a minute. We found 3 toe prints in a dirt mound with a little bit of a print of a pinky toe and a little bit of a print of a big toe. And we went down that open trail, and they called us from the road and said, "What in the world did y'all run into? Something's tearing the woods up." It flushed birds up about 40 yards away from us. So we dropped off to the left, and apparently the creature saw them and come back around the other side of the hill behind us and sat down so nobody'd see it. And we made it through this laurel thicket, which I thought, if this thing's mad at us, it's going to kill us in this laurel thicket, because we couldn't see more than 3 foot in front of us went this thicket. So we made it out there back to the road, and they never seen it, but they did hear it.
You
It was
mentioned
interesting.
the dog man thing too. Like, I've always been more partial to Bigfoot,
Uh-huh.
and then the dog man thing. I saw something years ago. It was like an upright canine, without jumping into the whole thing. And it's kind of, oddly enough, on Friday will be 17 years to the date that happened. And
Oh, wow.
that's what kind of changed my whole perspective on this whole cryptid thing in general, is because seeing that.
I believe
And
it.
I still can't come to the terms of accepting the possibility that there's an upright walking dog, just
Well,
because it doesn't make sense in like a scientific realm, I guess. So that's where but so many people have seen them. I can't deny what I've saw. And it's like,
wait,
it's hard
you
to,
ready for me to blow your mind?
it's hard to rationalize what they could possibly be.
Wait, you ready for me to blow your mind?
Go for it.
I'm writing a book now on Dogman. I've done research and everything, and I have discovered in my research that these things have been around since 400 BC. Anubis was
Hmm.
actually come from a Dogman tribe up through Africa to Egypt. There was it was wrote about by Marco Polo, that he wrote a story about, he ran into, was taken to a tribe in India of dogmen. They communicated by barking and yapping. They wore clothing, like furs and stuff. And at one time, they were, that tribe in India, the dogman tribe was up to 120,000 strong.
Hmm.
And in the early reports of St. Christopher, we all know about St. Christopher. He was always drawn
Like a
as a
dog.
dog
Or,
man,
yeah.
7 foot tall dog man. But now that changed with what was that era it come in? I can't remember. It changed after his death, but anyway. And they started portraying him as a human instead of having been a dog man.
Yeah, I've seen stuff on St. Christopher. It is strange that he was always depicted as a wolf type creature, dog man, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
I've got my own theories out there as well. Like, I've talked about on other episodes, like, you have Anubis, you have the Vikings had berserkers, I think is what they were referred to, and they were basically like these humanoid wolf beast men. And I believe the Celtics had something too. And then in France, you had the werewolf trials, I believe, in the 16 or 1700s, where people
Mhm.
were being accused of being a werewolf. So they'd burn them. And now you have dogmen. So if you look at all the different, all over the world, there's been reports of these humanoid canines. And some say werewolves, some say dogmen. Everyone on reviews that, oh, they're not the same thing. What if it's not a man changed into a wolf? What if it's just what this thing is? And they've just said it was a man changed into a wolf because it had human features back in the old days.
Yeah, I can believe that.
So,
I'll let you know in the new book.
hmm. Well, that's funny because I actually wrote one based off my encounter too.
Oh,
It's a
cool.
it's a fictionalized story, but stuff that I just referenced, it's in there as well. So no,
Hey,
I
if you
wrote a
want me to,
fiction
I'll be
version
more
of
than
it.
happy to put your encounter in the book.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I can I can talk to you more about it off air.
Okay.
So or I can send you what I've got wrote up for it to make it easier for you.
It's whatever you want to do. I'll be honored to put you in there. I'm gonna put in once I put in the history of all these creatures, I'm doing uh dogmen, werewolves, hellhounds, and skinwalkers. I'm gonna tell all the history about them. I'm gonna put in sightings. I'm gonna tell as much as I can possibly find about each one of these creatures. I'm gonna put in the book.
Okay. No, yeah, I'll definitely talk to you here in a bit once we're done with this.
All right.
No, you mentioned something about a near death experience. I've not actually had anyone come on here and talk to me about that, so that was definitely something that piqued my interest.
Okay.
So if you want to dive into that,
Sure. I'll be more than happy to tell you the story.
okay.
I don't like going to the doctor. I'm strange that way. I'm just a weird person.
I'm the same way.
And I was in my 20s, out of the Navy, and I got sick. And I wouldn't go to the doctor, and I was having a rough time breathing. So I finally went to the doctor, and the woman, nothing against most PAs. I'm sure there are some really great ones out there, but this individual I did not like because she goes, "You got a little bronchitis." Well, a week later, I was lethargic, unable to move. I had over 104 fever. I couldn't even lift my head or my arms up. And they took me to the hospital. Of course, as soon as they got me in the hospital, they went nuts. They started pumping me full of fluid and trying to get my fever down and all kinds of stuff. My lungs were halfway full of fluid with pneumonia. So I was struggling to breathe. And I don't know if it was the same night or the next night. It was all kind of a blur situation at the time. But I was in the bed in the hospital, and I just, for some reason, I woke up and I looked beside my bed, and there was an older woman standing beside my bed. And I was like, okay. And she smiled and said hello, and I said hello back to her. And I sat up in the bed and I looked over at the clock, and it was not moving. The second hand wasn't even moving. And it was just the calmest, most relaxed feeling I've ever had in my life. There was nothing that was bothering me. Everything was just, it was the most incredible feeling I've ever had. So I jumped down off the bed and something felt weird. So I looked back and my body was still in the bed. And this woman is starting to talk to me. So we're talking, and she tells me her name and everything. And I look over in a corner of the room, and there is this big shadowy figure that looks like an angel. I see what looks like wings, and but I couldn't make out his facial features except for one thing. He had the bluest eyes you ever seen in your life, and I still see them to this day. Just the most incredible eyes I've ever seen on a human being in my life. And he was probably 6.5 foot tall, but that's all I could really make of it. And all of a sudden, these people started coming through the walls of my room, and they're talking to me as they come in like they've known me forever, and they're introducing themselves. They tell me their name and stuff, and we're just talking. And all of a sudden, everybody gets real quiet. And Angel raised his hand, and there's this little, just a little pinprick of light pops up, and all of a sudden it goes poof, and the whole wall is nothing but light. You can't see through it, but it's not putting any heat out. It's just a light. It's not even casting any shadows, is what the weird thing was. Well, each person that was in the room, that's probably 5 people in the room, they each turned and walked over, told me bye, and walked into the light. And it was just me and the lady, the older lady that was there. And I thought, well, I guess I'll go. And I started towards it. She grabbed me and she said, "No, honey, no, no, no. It's not your time. You need to lay back down." And I thought, okay. I didn't even question her. And I got back on the bed and I sat down and I spun my feet back up and I went to lay down and I turned towards her as she was walking into the light. She smiled real big and she waved and told me bye. And all of a sudden the light was gone. And I laid back down and people come bursting into my room and there's alarms going off. And the nurse runs over to the bed. And I said, "What are you doing?" And everybody just stopped in her tracks. She said, "What?" I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "You're okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm fine, but I have a couple of questions for you." And she said, "Okay, well, hold on just a minute." And everybody cleared the room. It was just me and the nurse was there. And I said, "Who is this?" I mentioned the lady's name, and she got just pale. All the color left her face. And she said, "She died in this room before you got here." And I said, "Oh, okay." And I started naming off all these other people. And each one of those people that I named off and described to, I mean, it's perfect detail. And she just didn't know what to say. She told me each one of those people had died in the last week in that hospital area. And then she left. They kept coming in and asking me questions. I'll keep answering things. And that was it. I mean, it was actually a very good experience.
I'm I'm not like a religious person. I've said this before. So I've always wondered there has to be something, I would hope, but I'm not 100% sure what it would be. Like I said, I'm not against religion or anything like that. I just don't. I'm not a church person, I guess. I don't go to church. I don't read the Bible or anything like that. And obviously, there's other religions besides that as well.
Oh yeah.
So I just always just said, if you're a good person and do good, try and be the best you can. I hope that's good enough. If it's not, then I don't know. But I've always wondered. I had this discussion recently with someone not on air, but everyone wants to know what it's like on the other side. I said, "Do you know what would be the worst thing ever? Is never knowing, because if we were just to die and there's nothing, we would
Yeah,
never know. We would
that's
never know
true.
that we died." Like the thought of that is what terrifies most people, because I think we reach off or latch on to the hope that there's something else.
Well,
And
from my experience, there is.
yeah, so it's always like, I've always wondered, because I've heard stories similar to yours too, especially when people pass away, like a loved one passes away, we are all, when you go to their services, we're like, "Oh, we're hope to see you again," and everything else. And I do hope that there is something.
Yeah.
I would hope to one day to find out that there is something, and hopefully I'm going to the good place.
Well, I hope so too. Very much so.
But no, that's quite a experience you had with that one. It's and I've talked with other people before about not so much death, but when your energy leaves your body, like your soul leaves your body, they claim you travel through the astral plane and stuff like that. I don't know if that's similar to the same thing as what happens when we die. If our energy, our mind, our consciousness leaves and goes somewhere else. I don't know how any of that works. Obviously, I don't think anyone really does. But
No. But there was an interesting study done by some Swiss scientists. I think it was Swiss. They actually had some bodies laying in a holding area that people who were dying, and they had video cameras on them, and they were just recording constantly. And one of the videos, you actually see the person, they're laying there, and when you see when they take their last breath and they're dead, then in the video, now this was before they started all this being able to splice videos and all this, but you see on the security camera the soul, what looks like the soul, leave the body. It was the most incredible video I've ever seen.
I'll have to try and find that video.
It's hard to find. I have been looking for it. I wanted to post it on my site, but it's like all of a sudden now it's like, nope, we can't let you see that now.
There has been a scrubbing, and this is my conspiracy talk here. I believe there has been a movement going on to cleanse the internet of certain things, because I remember you could easily find certain pictures of cryptids, and there's one floating around, and I found it recently. The old Thunderbird photo.
Oh,
The old where the cowboys were holding up this bird,
I
and
remember that.
apparently it is a myth because people claim it doesn't exist. You can't find it. So I recently looked for it, and I thought I come across, and I showed it to this person on this Reddit that claims that. They're like, no, that's not the one I'm talking about. I was like, I mean, that's the one that I found. I don't know what one you're talking about, but they claim it was almost like they're holding a pterodactyl. And I
Yeah, it
vaguely
was from
remember
like
seeing that one.
1870 or something like that.
Yeah, I remember
Piece
seeing
of a
that one
plate.
too. And there's one there they're holding, it almost like a big raven hanging
Yeah,
up. And there's one that looks like a pterodactyl, like a couple cowboys are holding this pterodactyl looking thing up. Like the front, this was like it was laying on the ground. It wasn't hung up there, like holding it up by the head.
yeah.
You can barely find them anymore. Like it's buried. And then there's other things that I've noticed that you can't find either. It's almost like they're scrubbing the internet of certain things. And I don't know why.
Well, they've been scrubbing giants for a while too.
Yep.
Even the Smithsonian took out their, that one time they had a exhibit with giants and it was taken out.
Yeah, I've got an episode about the red-haired giants of Lovelock
Denmark.
Cave. So the giant topic's been something I've always been fascinated with too, and I've always heard tales of farmers digging up big bones and excavating stuff when they're out farming for their land or whatever, and then
Yep.
people come and take the skeletons and never hear anything about it again. Back in the old newspaper clippings of finding skeletons and stuff are still around, and now you can barely find them anymore.
Yep. Did you see the one where they took the sandal out of the Lovelock Cave in Nevada? The giant sandal, and they took the Bigfoot casting and it fit perfect.
No, I didn't see that, but it makes sense.
I read that article about that that had the picture in there, and I haven't been able to find it since.
Yeah, there's certain things that they limit, and honestly, the visibility of my podcast I think is somewhat surprising that the way it does, because there's certain things that we've talked about, and I've got episodes that haven't come out yet, but I think when they do, I'm probably going to get shadow banned just because of some of the topics that we've dived into on the conspiracy side of the podcast. But whenever those actually come out, I'm probably going to get banned from the YouTube and everything else. But
Well, I hope not.
I've already gotten a warning from them at once, so I wouldn't be surprised if I don't get it again. If they do, I'll just switch over to something else. But the podcast is available on all the streaming things too, so I've never had any issues. That's where everyone keeps saying is go to Rumble. So I've looked at that. I've got the Patreon too, so there's going to be anything that might be too controversial. I was like, I'll throw it on Patreon because I don't think they really monitor what goes on there either.
There you go.
But no, I don't try and come off like a whack job spouting off all sorts of nonsense. Like anything I talk about, I try and make sure at least I'm not one of the people that say birds aren't real. For some reason, that's a conspiracy that birds aren't real. It's like, I mean, I have chickens that lay eggs that I collect every day, and we eat those eggs. And I've had those chickens since they were hatched. So pretty sure they're real, but you never know.
I agree with you. I think they're real. Oh Lord.
Yeah, there's some weird rabbit holes that I don't want to go down into because I don't feel like you're going to come out of that one without feeling even dumber than you were the first time you went into it.
That I agree with. Did you see the most recent one about where the uh what was it? The moon is actually a light source.
That's almost like a flat Earth type thing.
Yeah, I'm like, no.
That is one, and I've talked about it several. That is one thing though that I am not so much. I don't think the moon is a light source,
No,
but I also don't think that we went to the moon back in the 1960s either.
really, I do. I still do.
No, without beating that dead horse again, there's just certain things that I've looked into and I've questioned, and I've always just thought we were trying to make sure we got there before anyone else did. So whether we actually got there or not, we're going to say we did. So I don't know. And then destroy the technology a few years afterwards so no one else could do it. We never tried to go back to the moon up until recently.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of questionable things, but no, I'm not, like I said, I don't try and prove or disprove anything to anyone. That's just my opinion.
Oh, there's nothing wrong with that at all. Nothing wrong with that, not one bit.
I've learned from the X Files not trust everything.
I don't have a lot of trust either, so I understand.
Hmm. I think that show growing up as a kid, that was like a super popular show during my teenage years,
It was good. It was a good show.
and
Oh,
it
I
definitely
think I watched.
influenced me on my mistrusting.
I think I watched every episode of that. I actually met the dude that had the cigarette all the time.
Oh, the Smoking Man,
Yeah, I
William
met
B.
him.
Davis, I think is his name or something like that.
I met him the same time I met Scotty from Star Trek.
Awesome. No, I've watched every episode, I believe, except for the ones that came out a couple of years ago.
No, I haven't watched those.
Yeah, they had some come out, I feel like in it's been almost maybe 10 years now, 8 or 10 years. They had like a season or two, like they were only like a half a season they came out, and I never watched those, so I don't know anything about how it went on from there. But I know I watched the original ones up to the early 2000s, right after David Duchovny left the show. Then he came back sporadically,
Yeah,
kind of killed the show at that point.
yeah, it did. I agree. Well,
But
he was kind of like the main part of the show though. So,
yeah, when your main actor leaves the show, it kind of ruins the show.
and they can't carry the storyline anymore after that.
No, they tried, but those last two seasons are a struggle to get through.
Oh yeah,
We just got to it. I was watching it with my wife again up until we got rid of Hulu a few months ago, and we just got to that season where he's gone, and we didn't finish it. But I don't know. Like I loved all the early stuff. The Monster of the Week ones were always my favorite.
yeah.
But no, that's I think where my fascination with monsters and aliens and conspiracies all came from. Was derived from that show.
I hate to confess something, but I think mine actually came with the Legend of Boggy Creek.
I've never honestly watched that. My mom has talked about it, how it terrified her as a kid.
Yeah, it's probably cheesy as everything now, but when it first come out, with the drive-in watching it,
Mm-hmm.
and it was for back in that time, it was rough. Like when the monster reaches through the window trying to get to the guy on the toilet,
Yep, that's the thing that she
carries the pigs
they
over top of the fence with one under each arm and everything.
yeah. That's what she always talked about when the hand came through after somebody. It's always
Yeah,
scary. I was like, I've never seen this, but I feel like if I watched it now, with it being so hyped up as being what it is, and then I'd end up watching, I'd be like, I don't understand why it was so scary.
yeah. Nowadays you'd be like, "Oh, this is cheesy."
I grew up a huge Godzilla fan. Like as a little kid, I've always loved Godzilla. I still collect all the stuff. I still watch all the movies, but
Oh,
now
that's cool.
my 2-year-old really loves Godzilla. So there's a channel that's just 24/7, like the old Japanese Godzilla movies.
Oh
And
yeah, the guy in the costume and all that.
yeah, he always yells for monster, monster. So I turn it on and I can't watch them anymore without like, man, This is so stupid looking. But as a kid, never noticed it. And as an adult, I'm like, man, I can't believe how goofy this looks. But I still love it all. But
When you get hooked on stuff as a kid, it just holds a special place for you.
yeah.
I watched Shot Theater. I watched all the original, I guess you could say, horror movies with the Wolfman, Lon Chaney Jr. and
Mm-hmm.
Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff. And I mean, nowadays you watch them, it's like, that's not really scary. But for me, growing up watching Shot Theater, it was the greatest thing ever.
Yeah. No,
And I'm still a big Frankenstein fan. The monster is so cool.
the creature from the Black Lagoon was always my favorite.
Oh,
And even
yeah.
that suit I've talked about on a different episode, but that suit still holds up today
Oh, yeah.
for the standard of how they made that one.
Oh, I agree. I agree 100,000%.
Like that was probably one of the best man in suit movies I've ever seen.
And he did it so well.
Mm-hmm.
He truly did. He had all the movements right, everything.
Yeah. Definitely as a kid, I knew it was supposed to be a guy in a suit, but I was like, how's he swimming underwater? Like it all sort of like there's weird things you'd think about now as an adult. Like he was swimming underwater. He didn't have a breathing apparatus or anything on, so it was weird how they filmed some of that, but
On the back of the suit, there was a small tank that he
no.
used for a lot of the stuff that come up through where the dorsal fin of the suit is.
Yeah.
If you ever watch it, you notice it's raised up.
So they hit it under that.
They hit it under that and they went right straight to his mouth.
Hmm. No, I've
All
never
reason I
watched
know
it.
is we met the guy who uh, did the stuff, and
Yeah.
we met him at one of the conventions, and he was talking about how they did it and the suit, and he was really a neat guy.
Yeah. I met a couple of the more modern, like Tom Savini and
Oh
Greg
yeah,
Nicotero at a convention. And I thought that was pretty cool, but they weren't really talking to you. You had to wait in line, go up and get your little autograph or a picture with them and keep on moving. They didn't have
yeah,
time to chit chat or anything. So
yeah. Tom Savini he's a little bit stuck up.
I was getting ready to say, I've heard he's very arrogant,
He is. Oh God,
but
yeah. We I did a bunch of conventions. Man, we used to do conventions all the time, and I met a lot of the actors and all that there. And he was one that I just never did get along with. Even when he wasn't busy, he was still like, he was like he was better than everybody else. I had a problem with him, but
met
everybody has their own thing.
met Sid Haig,
Oh yeah,
and
he's cool.
he actually had filmed a movie here in Peru where I live, and we kind of talked to him for a little bit about that. It was funny because one of my friends met him when he was here and I hung out with him, and we kind of chit chat about knowing the same people just from him being here to film in that weird clown movie that he made back in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Not not one of the killer movies or anything like that. He just played a normal clown. But it was nice to meet him, and then like I said, met some of the other people, but other than that, I haven't really been to any of the conventions other than that one. I've been to like one or two other ones, but
Oh, I used to be convention crazy. I wanted to go meet all of them and talk to all of them. And I did. But when I started doing the acting and stuff, I just got to a point where I had lost all that. Oh, you're a movie star. It's like, okay.
mhm. When you meet people in real life, it loses that luster, I guess.
Except for Robert England. He
No.
holds up. He is nuts. I got to laughing and cutting up with him. I walked up to him. I just looked at him. I said, stripper zombies, really? He said, he looked at me and smiled real big and said, Jenna Jameson. I said, okay, you got me.
Yeah. I
Man,
haven't I
he
haven't
was
ever
good.
seen that one.
Don't. It's really bad.
I used to be a huge, huge zombie fan. I've actually got a zombie tattoo, one of my many. But I did meet George A. Romero. That
Oh, he
was
was
like
awesome.
that was my highlight. That was the whole reason I went there to meet him because the Night of the Living Dead movies were always my favorite. The Dead
Oh yeah.
movies were, and so I got to meet him, got his autograph, got a photo with him, and then he ended up passing away about I think it was 6, 7 years ago now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he never got to finish those movies. But
He was a good guy. I met him and talked and laughed and cut up with him a little bit too.
yeah, he seemed really nice. He actually talked to us for a few seconds, like obviously again waiting in line to get your autograph and everything else, but he seemed pretty nice.
I've met some really good ones and I've met some really bad ones. Like I did not like Brett Spiner. I
I
found
don't
him just obnoxious.
I don't know who that is.
He played Data from Star Trek.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I guess we're getting off subject again. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. No. Anyone anyone that listens to the show, we don't always stay on topic. I've, it's a pretty much open discussion for the most part, but
That's what my podcast is too.
it, like we hit some points here and there, then it kind of goes off on little tangents here and there too, but it is what it is.
There ain't nothing wrong with that. It's better to have fun with it.
Yeah. No, you said you had some ghost stories, paranormal stuff, experiences too. If there's anything you want to talk about on that side of the spectrum, we can get back on that's get back on topic for the listeners.
uh I've never had any bad experience with ghosts so far. I did have a not so happy experience with a shadow person. Those are just evil. Uh, a buddy of mine had a house. He was renting a house, and it was from 18. Oh, it's like mid 1800s. The house was built, and we went. He was showing me the house, and it never felt. It felt really uncomfortable being there. And we walked downstairs, and they actually had cages, human-sized cages, built into the granite uh, walls of the basement. And we were down there, and he was showing me this, and it was just, they had chains and stuff inside those cages, and it just felt really, really weird and kind of made the hair on your arm stand up. And I got to watching, and we was down there. He had like 170-pound Rottweiler, and the Rottweiler started crying and backing up into the corner of the basement behind us. And I looked what the dog was staring at, and it was looked like a shadow there, an outline of a person. And this thing started moving, and it went across the wall of the basement. Well, when it did, the dog took off upstairs. So I figured, I think I'll go upstairs too. And we walked back upstairs, and he closed the door to the basement. Well, we were standing there talking, all of a sudden the door flew open, and this shadow thing just eased out the door and around the door jamb across the wall into the back wall of the room, and went all the way across that wall. And it had like almost like it had red eyes. And it started up on the ceiling. When it did that, I said, okay, I'm out of here. And I left. Because you could just feel the evil in that thing. They didn't stay there much longer. They left not long after that. But it was just a creepy, very eerie feeling. And
Shadow things, I've had a couple different people talk about them, and I've always wondered if what we're seeing is shadow people, if it's a spirit or if it's an energy, or maybe it's just something that I don't want to go off on the whole interdimensional thing, but it's like I've wondered if maybe what we're seeing from the spirit realm isn't bleeding into our world, so we don't get to see the whole thing. We only see bits and pieces, and they come off as looking like a shadow.
could
Maybe
be. it's just the weirdest. I never had that feeling with any ghost I've ever seen, but I did with that shadow thing. It was creepy. It felt eerie the whole time.
Yeah, I can't speak on anything like that. I have recently, and I don't want to heard it all about my own stuff, but the last few weeks there was some weird things going on in my own house, and I got up one night to go get a drink, and as I turned around, I had to go out to the garage because we have a fridge out in the garage too, and the drink that I was going to go get was out in the garage, and it was about probably 2 in the morning. I don't know the
Yeah.
exact time. When I came back in, I'd seen this little, maybe 18-inch shadowy figure run down the hallway and then went right around the corner towards my daughter's bedroom. And there's been all sorts of weird things that have always happened to her room.
Huh.
So I barged into that room and I didn't see anything. She was sleeping in her bed. So I can't explain that. Like, it wasn't a person, it was small, like smaller, but definitely looked like it was on two legs.
Oh, that's interesting. Where you're at, is there any kind of a history for that area?
Where I'm at is very much Native American lands.
Oh, that can explain quite a bit right there then.
I'm between two rivers. There's a river about 2 miles to the south and probably about 2 to 3 miles to the north.
That's a
So,
lot of energy.
yep. And this whole area used to be the Miami Indian area.
You
So
might have little people.
that's they're not too far. There's, and I mentioned it on other episodes too. There's a state park probably about an hour or so away called the Mound State Park, and there's been lots of sightings there of, they call them puckwudgies. And there was also a place about maybe 45 minutes from here, half hour, 45 minutes. It was the old 1812 battleground. They do reenactments and stuff out there. When I was in school, we called it Hobbit Land
Oh,
because a lot of the people that I'd always talk to, that we went out to high school and they did their teenage fun things out in the middle of nowhere that teenagers do,
yeah.
they swore they seen little humans running around out in the woods. And they call them hobbits because that was obviously in the early 2000s. That was when Lord of the Rings were popular. So obviously
Oh,
hobbits,
yeah.
that's what they thought about. But now that I've been researching and doing this stuff and talking with people, I was like, I wonder if that's not the same things that people are seeing that they call puckwudgies.
Could
Like,
be. Could very well be.
so
And their, I guess you could say, personality, it depends on which kind they are. There's a lot of them are not evil. They're not mean. They're not bad. They actually watch over and heal. So I researched a bunch of the little people from all over the place, and all in all, they're not bad. I mean, most of them. I mean, you get a few. They're one of the creatures that they're not inherently evil. They're not inherently good. They're able to decide what they want to be.
I've heard there's somewhat tricksters here and there too.
Yeah, they like to play, and it's even true with the Cherokee little people. They're the same way. There's some of them that are some are good, some are bad, some are jokers, some are just like to mess with you.
Yeah. I've often wondered if they're not part of the whole faith thing too, because there's similar stories when you listen to what people encounter when they call it the Fae, obviously, like the fairy folk or whatever. They're the small humanoid type things too. You have your
Yeah.
leprechauns that were mentioned, and apparently, I think, I don't remember if it's Sweden or Norway, they have the little elf houses they built out in the fields or whatever. They've got these little makeshift houses they put out there, they said, for the elves. So I was like, there's all sorts of weird lore in other countries for these little people too. So it kind of makes sense that if they're seeing it somewhere thousands of miles away, however, the Native Americans here have the same type of experiences. There's no way to communicate that back in those days.
Right. Yeah, you're exactly right.
That's how I always come back to when, even with Sasquatch, like all these tribes around the world have talked about hairy man, or some sort of a big creature. There's been cave paintings. How are all these stories getting spread around throughout the world? And I've said the same thing with like pyramids. Ancient Egyptians were building pyramids. The Mayans were building pyramids. I think there's pyramids in China. There's pyramids elsewhere.
Oh, they're everywhere.
Like,
Yeah.
how did we all learn? Like our ancestors learned to start building pyramids. Like, it's just weird how it all happened because they're all thousands of miles apart and we didn't have communications that we're aware of. But we have all these structures that are built and some that they can't even replicate today.
That's true. You're exactly right.
So there's a lot of weird stuff with history that I've always questioned too, just because I'm not trying to discredit what the humans did, but today it just seems like there had to have been a little bit more help and knowledge than what they make them out to be.
I think we're only taught very little of what actually happened throughout history. I think a lot of it is kept from us. I think a lot of the civilizations that happened before us has been banned, to say, not for lack of a better word, so that we're not allowed to learn about them. There's just too many things out there that doesn't make sense without it.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. That's one of the many topics we talk about on here is seems like it always gets brought up that I feel like history's been changed or we're not allowed to learn what they wanted to or didn't want us to learn because why we're being kept in the dark about certain things, I don't know. Like if they know Sasquatch exists, why do they hide that? If they knew giants exist, why do they hide that?
Well,
If
the
they
only thing that gets me is even the military even puts out to like expeditionary forces when they're doing training in certain areas not to mess with Bigfoot. So if it's not real, why are you putting out paperwork saying not to mess with it?
right.
I mean, I've seen the paperwork. I had friends that was an mountain as an expeditionary forces. So uh, sometimes they oversimplify things and they catch themselves in their own lies.
Mm-hmm. I remember the story of Mount St. Helens when it exploded and they claimed that people showed up and they were helicoptering off these burnt Sasquatches and like the bodies and stuff, and they had one going out there with these people helping find burnt ones. Why, if that was true, I don't know how they managed to keep the public away from all of that, but if they're able to work with things, communicate with things, are they that close to humans? Is that part of the reason why they want to try and hide it? But again, that still doesn't add up. It doesn't make any sense. There's tribes that the Sentinels or the Sentinels, I forget what they're called. That tribe out by India where if any outsider shows up, they supposedly kill the people, like the
Yeah,
tribe. And if there's still tribes like that, and I think there's some in South America.
they still have cannibals and stuff down in towards the Congo.
Yeah. So
Some they just discovered.
if they still have tribes like that, and these Sasquatches are just offshoots of man, like just a normal, different type of hominid, what's the reasoning as to why they can't be exist? If they talk about a Gigantopithecus, I'm not saying that's what they are, but seems to be similar to what descriptions show. If that's the case, or like an offshoot of that, why hide it? So there's got to be something more to it.
I think it's all control. I think that's what it all bases down to is they want to be able to control what you see, what you hear, what you believe. Because if you believe there's something else out there and we're no longer the apex there is, it kind of changes the whole dynamic of civilization.
Yeah. That's kind of how I feel too when it comes to like this whole UFO disclosures and aliens and stuff like that. I don't think they're ever going to come outright and be like, nope, there's life out there. We've been hiding it from you because that just means they're going to admit to lying this whole time, and that's not what they're going to do.
No, they're never going to admit to it.
I think it's going to take some stuff going down that they can't hide anymore from everyone to actually happen to enlighten us. I think the mothership's going to have to just come down Independence Day style, and they can do what they got to do to try and cover that up, but I don't think there's going to be any
Somebody
ways.
come in a little bit better attitude.
Yeah. If they come in Independence Day style, as long as they're not blowing us up, it'll be all right. But I think if they, to be 100% honest, and I know it's morbid to say this, but I feel like if aliens were if they came all the way here, they're going to look at us and either turn around and leave because we're hopeless because we can't even get along with each other. How are we supposed to get along with a different civilization of species?
Yeah.
Or they're just going to be like, all right, these guys are worthless. Just wipe them out, take the resources.
Yeah. I still think that when they come by Earth, they roll the windows up.
lock the doors as they drive by.
This is the ghetto. Hurry, roll the windows up.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me.
Or,
They take a detour to bypass coming through here.
well, now there's one theory I used to thought was stupid at one time, but now it kind of makes sense that Earth is nothing more than a zoo.
Yeah, I've heard that one too.
And from what I've seen of people on TV and what way things are going, I can believe it because
I
they
think
act like animals.
South Park did an episode years ago where Earth was a reality show for the rest of the universe. I was like, that makes sense. I was like, that's probably the truth of the whole matter is that episode.
I can believe that.
They just put us all here just to they cause all the problems just so it's a reality show. Let's see what happens next. Tune in next week to Earth.
Yeah, I can believe that.
I've always joked around with people. I was like, I think South Park as a cartoon is probably one of the most realist show out there.
I've watched a few of those. I like some of South Park.
I haven't watched them in years. It's I think it's probably been like 6-7 years. I haven't even been able to watch it. Having kids and everything, it's not really something I want the kids watching.
No, they definitely don't want your little ones watching that.
No. This house
I'm not
now
sure
is
I
always
won't
on
mind
Disney
watching it
Channel or
during the 30s.
Nickelodeon. Yeah. Well, George, I think we can probably wrap this up unless there's anything else you want to discuss.
No, I think we've discussed pretty good, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
No, I loved having you on here. Love talking with you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
If you want to let everyone know where they can look for your books at, what the names of them are, and you're on podcasts where they can check that out at too, go ahead.
Okay, well, we're definitely on. I know we're on Spotify. It's NCI North Carolina Investigates. You'll hear a bunch of crazy people talking about all kinds of weird things, our adventures in investigations, and all kinds of good stuff. And then you've got my books are both my books. I only have 2 books out right now. The other ones have been pulled. I have 2 books. They're on Amazon. One's called Legends, Myths, Monsters, and Ghosts. There is about 8 or 10 stories per state for every state in the United States, plus 5 of the Indian tribes. Another book is called Monsters of the World. There's 104 different cryptid creatures from all over the world. And you're going to go wild when you read it because there's some monsters in there you probably never even heard of. And there's 26 encounters that I was honored enough to put in the book that were sent to me. And I would definitely suggest reading those. And if you know anybody that had a encounter in the book, get them to sign the book because they've earned it. They've had some great encounters. Other than that, that's about it. I'm going to work on my new book and hope to get it out by October. I'm going to be self-publishing this time, so I'll have a little bit more control of the book. And that's pretty much it for me.
Awesome. Well, again, for any of the listeners, I'll try and include the show note or in the show notes, all of the links and stuff for it. So be easy for them to find.
Thank you, sir. I greatly appreciate you.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for coming on here and talking with me tonight. It's been a pleasure.
I've enjoyed it.
All right. Well, we're going to roll on out. So again, thanks to George and thanks for listening. Remember, the truth lies in the stories we share, the connections we make. Stay curious, stay open-minded. Thank you all for joining us on this journey. And until next time, keep questioning, keep seeking, and keep exploring the unknown. Good night, everyone.